This is Dan Rogers, your host on We the People Town Square, coming to you from the center of the universe, the high plains of Texas, near the headwaters of the Prairie Dog Town Fork of the Red River. Today is January the 3rd of 2024, and today we are here with Richard Beyea, who's running for the House District 87 race for state representative. Richard, welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Let's start off by telling the voters, why did you jump in this race at the last minute?
That's a good question. I've answered that several times, and a lot of people wondering about it too. The answer is I looked at it when Four retired. I actually went down, had lunch with him, and kind of chewed him out and said, Four, you were supposed to retire. You were supposed to tell me when you were going to retire. And he thought that was pretty funny because he didn't owe me anything. But he did explain to me why he was bowing out. And I think he's got a good track record, and I think he's got a long-term service. The state's in good shape right now. And I think that I took a look at it and said there were some other individuals that were in the race at that point or coming into the race at that point. And I said, well, we need a strong, conservative, experienced, small government voice in this role. And I looked at it and looked at who ended up in the race, and I started getting calls from toward the end of the sign-up period. I think a lot of people looked at the race and said, we've got some people that have various skill sets, but not the ones that necessarily at this time match what House District 87 needs. After that, and listening to a bunch of friends, small town, rural communities have got little bit different issues than Potter does. But I think we need to address those, and we don't need to be getting eaten alive down in the House.
So you think you have the capacity to represent all the district?
Yeah, I don't think so. I used to live in Randall County over off Sleepy Hollow, and worked in Potter County. I don't think our needs are necessarily a whole lot different whether I'm in Potter County or whether I'm out in one of our rural communities. They're a little bit different, but I don't think we're that far different. We're still supposed to be the most conservative part of the state of Texas, right? So we should have pretty much agreement on most of the issues that I think are relevant right now. And you remember you quoted Ronald Reagan to me out in the parking lot, I think, but I'll quote one to you, that somebody that agrees with me 80% of the time is still my ally. So I think it really comes down to effectiveness and whether I can go in and address the concerns of the people of the district and make arguments for them in the legislature where we can get things done that benefit our community. I've been down in, we can probably go into this a little bit later. I don't know where your questions are going, but I've been down in Austin quite a bit the last 5 years, and it's trying to get a voice for the energy industry. And I think we've been successful at that work. I'm the chairman of Panhandle Producers and Royalty Association organization, and we can walk into Austin now and have a voice, but it takes work, and you need to know what the arguments are, and you need to be able to make those arguments. And it needs to be, particularly with the way the directions we're going here the last couple of years. My whole service history has been as a public servant. I don't see some of that in Austin anymore, and I do think we need to look at doing as much as we can with less. But my whole bias is toward small government.
So you're in the oil and gas business.
I've been in the oil and gas business for a long time. I worked for, people will know this, Diamond Shamrock Maxis here for a while, worked out around Canadian. We started our own company several years ago. We're kind of we're wildcatter. We were drilling wildcat wells. That's how we made our money, and so I think I understand the risk. My wife doesn't think so at times, but I'll get through that. But yes, I'm in the oil and gas business, and I'm on the school board up in Perryton. So the part of the problem is when you're in oil and gas, you get booms and you get busts, and that creates budgetary issues. I've got a couple ideas on how we can smooth those budgetary swings out, because now, if you've just gone through the boom we had on revenues, where we had several $1 billion of surplus last year, everybody was happy with that. It recharged everybody. This year we're going to get whacked. So and this is what I keep telling my school board, we're gonna take some hits this year. The question is, can the people that were happy spending the money last year, can they take the hits and still be happy this year?
Well, so you're on the school board in Perryton, so you've got some experience dealing with a lot of different issues then.
Yes, tax rates, tax swings, and probably, again, small town, commodity-driven small towns, whether it's oil and gas or ag. You get through those commodity swings, you get big years on the budget side, and then turns around and you end up with getting people almost the point of riffing or reductions in force, and that's an unhealthy way to run a school district. You can't hardly plan longer term. There's some things we can do about that. So.
Well, and in the ag world, it's even worse, because you may have one good year, but 7 bad years,
Yes. Well, oil and gas is not a whole lot different than that, but
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, so the trick is to control costs as a business person, right?
Well, I think a business person is the one that needs to be in it. I think that's exactly what we need, and that's the approach we need to take in Austin, right? So we need to control costs, and you can't. Where I see the shift in the conversation going here is, what new taxes do we need to raise, or how do we restructure the tax code? And I don't care if you're at a local level or the state level, or particularly our friends at the federal level. Government is too big all the way across the board at every level. And so we can talk about which taxes we need to raise, but if you're spending too much, then you're not going to catch up with what you're doing. And I went back the other day and looked at where we are on relative to California was 20 years ago. And if you look at the budgets, we've got accelerations in our budget that are way past the population growth. And so we're having a pretty good time with our surpluses in our budget. Texas is healthy. We need to keep it healthy, but we can't get enamored with spending other people's money.
Well, is Texas doing the right things, or is all the other states doing the wrong things?
Well, that's a piece of dynamite. Texas is doing many of the right things. I think we've got the right approach on almost across the board, but I do think. Again, my background's energy, right? So we went through, for example, where everybody's battling this green energy policy things, and we went through where the state tried to help us when we went through Winter Storm Uri. And the answer is, are we doing the right things? Every time I turn around and see, we had 40, I don't remember what the count was. We had 4,900 bills proposed last session. Mm-hmm. If everybody looks at that right, well, that's 4,900 bills fixing things that may or may not need to be fixed, but we're putting additional burdens on our free choices in the society. So we can do that, but you end up people need to understand that if we give up our economic freedoms, sooner or later they're going to be removing political freedoms. If I remove choices from you, I'm going to have to follow it up with removing your political choices too. It's the path where we have our individual liberties just kind of drift away. So Texas is doing good. The reason I was laughing earlier is I look at California, and I read a chairman's letter for our publication on oil and gas. California is perpetually the bad example, but there's plenty of others out there. And one of the things that I thought was disturbing in the approach, and I know we were trying to do things well, but at the same time, by the time we're emulating arguments from California on how to fix our energy crisis, which the energy industry supports a great deal of our economy. It's Texas jobs, and to think we're going to buy Chinese windmills and do our economy any good here is just a fallacy. So, yes, we're doing a lot of things right, yet can we do them better? Yes, and we can get into those issues. But I don't think Texas ought to follow anybody. I think we ought to be the leader in everything.
Yeah, let's think a little bit about the future and how we can best prepare ourselves and not always look backwards and how we did things. I think that's seems to be the biggest problem that what I hear from voters, when I talk to voters, they go, oh, yeah, well, so-and-so politician, all they do is talk about problems.
Yes, yeah.
They don't ever talk about any solutions.
Yes, and I think that's exactly right. I think it's easier to look at problems and I don't make sure I choose my words right here and complain about them, because that's what's right in front of us, right? The things that we are either working or we think they're working tend to be low on our radar, right? So some of the efforts, like with the border, some of the efforts are the way we've approached issues that are from the federal government. Okay, this is going to sound like this is meant to be positive, but it's going to sound like it's negative. Some of the things that the federal government's been forcing on us, which I think our state has done well at resisting, are exactly the places we don't want to go. So yes, that'll be a negative on what we don't want to do. But if we can maintain our enough sovereignty, and I don't want to get too far into that down that road, but if we can maintain building better lives for Texans, I think that's the way we need to go. And you look at the prosperity, look at everybody moving in here. We're doing something right. We're doing multiple things right. Texas problem right now is we have a lot of growth problems. So we get the I-35 corridor tax rates affecting everything up here, and all of a sudden you're saying, well, what's reasonable and what's rational, and we've got to put a lid on it, and find out how we're going to improve the average Texan's life. I hear a lot of complaints. I'm on the school board again, and I'm on the appraisal district board up in Perryton. And I hear a lot of complaints about our tax rates and our tax burdens, and that's correct. So we want to I think Jefferson said, they always get misquoted, but I think Jefferson said that government governs best, which governs least. And he didn't mean cut essential services. He meant that the people that are trying to rule over you had better make sure those are essentials, and they're not just things of wannabes. There's a lot of wannabe stuff going on, or want lists going on in Austin right now.
Well, I think the voters want somebody to represent them, not rule them.
Yes.
But what happens, even here on the local level, as soon as people get elected, they quit listening to the voters.
Yes.
The voters can't get a hold of them, and they feel like they're being ruled. They go around the voters on certificate of obligations to build buildings that they didn't want. Like, where'd this come from? And then once they're in office, it's almost impossible to get them out.
Well, it's fun to spend other people's money. Okay.
I've never had that luxury.
Me neither. But I think it's fun to spend other people's money, and of course the money turns around and it builds up the incumbency thing, where it's almost impossible to get movement in the government.
But that's because it's the way our system's set up, right?
Yes.
So when you announce for office, here come the consultants, and they promise, oh, we'll get you this money, the PAC money, this money, to help you get elected. Most people don't have the ability to run their own race. Most people aren't smart enough to run their own race. That's a problem. So these people who, so then they depend upon the special interest or the moneyed people, and then they're beholden to them. So you perpetuate the cycle, and we can't get out of that loop. So to me, we're going to have to do something to reform how our elections are funded. at some point in time, or everything's going to implode, don't you think?
Yeah, I'd like to know. I'd like to know what the solution is. I mean, you can start limiting spending and start eliminating out-of-state spending, contributions to local elections. I think you can do things like that, and I think you can contain it. But
to me, there should be no PACs. There should be, if you can't vote for somebody, you shouldn't be able to contribute to somebody.
Yeah,
if you can't vote, there's no contribution, which means there's no corporate money, no business money, no PACs, no 501c4s. None of this stuff should exist, in my opinion. And the local people in that race should be the ones that contribute and help somebody in their community get elected. That brings it back to the community.
yes, and government at all levels is better the closer you get to the voter, right?
That's right. I mean, it's a very simple thing you could do and eliminate all this stuff. And if people in District 87 want to help you, they should be able to help you with whatever resources they have. But if they're outside of your district, I don't think they should be able to.
Well, I think you saw that in a lot of the congressional elections last year, where you have and in Texas with some of the elections that were in Texas, Mr. Beto running against Mr. Cruz, Senator Cruz. I think you saw the outside money pour in, right? And I think outside money from California, which you don't need a California answer for Texas.
That's right.
So how do you effectively limit it and have people have a strong voice? But I do agree with you. The money has taken over the system. This whole thing is about how much money I can raise. And if I talk to political consultants, which you have to occasionally, they are more concerned about the amount of dollars you can throw into the system as opposed to what the actual message is. And Dan, I'm enough of an ideologue. I think that we ought to run and win elections and put people in our districts that are actually speaking to the ideas of what the needs of the district are.
Yeah. It's a problem. And, but to get the elected representatives to change the system, how would you do that?
Kind of like term limits, isn't it? So everybody volunteers for term limits until they get in office, right?
Yeah, they say that everybody's for term limits when they run.
Yes.
And then, but once they get elected, the bill mysteriously gets killed in committee.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do that, right? So, as far as how do you limit it, I think those are basic ideas. You have to have people that are involved in the lives in that district, maybe with some restrictions on where you can get the funds. But that's another thing. Like term limits, it's going to be tough. You're knocking off a whole political class, basically.
Well, that'd be a lot of fun. Well, there is a way to do it, I think. Yeah. We may have to, I think it's Article 2 or Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution says it's the people, the individuals, the citizens have the authority, not the politicians.
I think the Constitution says that too, but look how far we've gone down the wrong roads.
Well, people don't read it, and people don't think about it, and then people don't take action.
Yes.
We're too entertained. People are focused on sports, entertainment, and they're not focused on their government.
Yeah, I think you're starting to talk about sounds like the Roman Empire here, and that didn't end up well by the time we were doing that. So you've got to love the country, but you've also, we've so far got away from the 10th Amendment and whatever independence the states have to run our own businesses. Because quite honestly, I look at the things that go on in New York, or I look at the things that go on in California. Shoot, the New York legislature stood up and cheered for partial birth abortion. I'm beginning to think I have nothing in common with the people on the coast. Nothing.
Well, my theory is if that's the way they believe, that's fine. I don't care, but don't bring it here.
But that's
not. Texas shouldn't tell people in New York
exactly
what to do.
Yeah. If they want to spend, as long as they can pay their bills,
but
right?
It shouldn't be a federal issue. I believe the states have the power, not the federal government, right? And that's really what the Civil War was all about.
Yeah, it's and the people from there, and the people from there. That's right.
And people get that confused. They say it was about slavery. That's not true.
Yeah.
That was brought in later because Lincoln was losing support for the war, and he brought that issue in to build support in the North because they were losing. And then when he freed the slaves, he only freed the slaves in the South. He didn't free the slaves in the North.
Yeah.
And people let the media tell them what to think instead of them doing the research and learning on their own.
Well, you can't make most of your decisions, whether it's in your life or whether it's for a community or at the state level, by operating in fear.
That's right.
And if you're operating out of fear, you've probably not got the right message, and you've probably not got the right motivation to accomplish anything. Basically, the old saying says, "How do you turn a liberal or progressive into a conservative? Is you may start making them pay their own bills."
Yeah.
At the federal level, we got $34 trillion worth, or whatever the number is this week, on federal debt that is unsustainable, and that's the kindest word to say for it. It's not, we can't go forward with this.
And that's just federal debt.
That's right? Just federal debt, and that's federal government debt only, right? It doesn't include everything else. So we are going to, and I don't usually quote Democrats, but I'll quote Kennedy in this. Ask not what you can do, or what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, right? If that's a bad paraphrase. But at the same time, we've got to get used to not thinking that every solution comes from either our government.
Right.
And the first thing we do is we stick our hand out and say, "Gimme, gimme, gimme." But you see it in Austin. I've been kind of a vocal advocate against a lot of the green energy stuff. And if you read Professor Lomborg's book, even if you believe the global warming things, even if you believe there are things we should change, we're not doing it well. We're wasting tons of money. I don't want to see 10-story offshore windmills down off the Texas Riviera. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, if they believed what they say, they would want global warming. Because global warming is when society benefits, you have more rainfall, you have more food. Civilizations have expanded throughout history during periods of global warming.
Yes.
It's when the earth starts to cool, that's when you have the dark ages. That's when you have war. That's when you have famine. That's when you have disease, drought. All kinds of bad things happen when you have global cooling.
Yes. And so my degree's in petroleum engineering, or my degree's actually in geological engineering. I am a registered petroleum engineer in the state of Texas. I'm also a registered geoscientist. Some of my training in Arizona, I took my best rock lab experience ever, and that was hiking down through the Grand Canyon. And it's exactly what you said. When life blooms is because we're heavy on the CO2. In fact, if the study they all use to condemn all this is, 93% of the scientists, whatever you say, and 93% of those scientists are probably sociologists. If you listen to the physics people, you will William Happer, I think, out of Princeton. If you listen to those people, that we have the best way. We are actually in a CO2 deprivation right now, which is amazing. Some of these things, but the next big boondoggle. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but the next big boondoggle seems to be CO2 sequestration. If we're removing CO2 from the atmosphere, then we're defeating plant growth. We are, because if you know enough about agriculture and growing plants, CO2 is good.
That's right.
It's the good. It's the gas of life.
Yeah, and plants take that and turn it into oxygen for us.
Yes, it's amazing how that works. But I guess until I hear something out of the progressive mouth that says, "Oh, I'm not worried about breathing anymore, so I don't need oxygen," then I think most of this stuff is counterproductive. And what we've got to be, if I will look at Washington, D.C., and that, a lot of the activities they do is once you cannot compete on a manufacturing level, and President Trump was trying to get to some of this before they all went haywire on him, was you need to bring manufacturing and jobs back that produce something.
That's right.
If you can't produce something, If you can't make your economy grow through productive activities, then you start making up things to create jobs. You remember all the argument about we're going to, my favorite person, Kamala Harris, was quoting on how to grow economies, and her idea is more and more government spending. Nancy Pelosi said welfare checks are stimulative. I mean, someplace here you can't swallow all this stuff and grow your economy. We need to look to the future. You were talking about the future. If we want Texas where our kids are happy to be here and they're prosperous and they're growing, yours and my grandkids, although I don't have any grandchildren right yet, we need to be building the future for them. And it can't be debt doesn't lead to prosperity. No. And we seem to be running on that. I noticed the whole thing on modern monetary theory comments started to disappear. They haven't brought that up for 2 or 3 years. But that's what they're still practicing.
More money today.
Yeah, more money today, or modern monetary theory, right? It's bothersome that the people making a lot of the rules, who have put themselves in the ruling class now, don't have any sense. They don't have any common sense, but they don't have any sense of business and how things grow. So we've held on to that here in the Texas Panhandle. We do a pretty good job of that. The question is, we can't give up any more ground, because the problems are going to be with us 10 years down the road. But I believe that we are at a tipping point, not only in America, but we're also at a tipping point of which direction Texas will choose. And we can't give up ground easily, because we're giving up our freedoms. We're giving up everything that you and I would value. And a lot of our kids don't understand the import of where they are because we've not been raising them up right. We've missed opportunities to train them. Let me tell you a story real fast. We got hit by a tornado in Perryton this year. We lost a friend. There were three people killed. It was just a tragedy. I'm standing on the street corner with our Ronnie Jackson and his wife, and I don't remember who was actually around me at that point, Kevin Sparks and his wife Jill, and a lot of the local dignitaries were there. I think 4 was there too. And the YouTube videos were correct. If you looked at the YouTube videos, when I saw the YouTube videos, I thought we were going to have 150 people killed. It just wiped out the north side and everything east, and that tornado just dropped down on us. But I was standing there in the street corner, and I said, that's the most encouraging thing you're going to see today. And everybody looked, and it was a bunch of our kids, small-town kids, and they had brooms and shovels, and they were over there cleaning up Main Street. I worked at some of the relief center. My wife spent a couple weeks over at one of the relief centers cooking food for everybody, and I'd have kids, seventh and eighth grade kids. That's a guess, because I think a couple were younger than that. Come in and say, "What can I do?" The salvation of this country, the salvation of Texas, is in those small town kids.
Yep.
I don't care what color they are. I don't care what religion they are. I don't care what.
Yeah, nobody cares.
It's that they're willing because they feel part of the community. The thing we need to do in Texas is keep that sense of community, that we are united. And it's not everybody's going to be happy with every decision I make, and I understand that, but it goes back to that 80% rule. Okay? If you and I, and I've said this for years on the school board, if you and I at the end of the day can say our objective is a quality education, I can work with you.
Sure.
You won't always be happy with me. But there's nobody I know that says, I really don't value education. I don't find anybody that says that. So if we start the premise on school education with, I value high quality education, you and I can get to something. We may disagree on how to get there, but our objectives are the same.
There may be more than one way to get there.
Yes.
But we need to have the discussion and be able to have the discussion without people labeling people into groups and dividing. And I think your point's well taken about, it's about community. And so we need to have these discussions. Right now the big discussion is on school choice.
Yes.
And there are vested interests in not having school choice. And there's people that want school choice. Where do you come down on that issue?
Well, I think there was a thing that was very interesting that came out of the COVID experience was the schools got, like they give the banks occasionally, the schools got stress tested. In Perryton, because I know that best, right? We knew within 6 weeks that the remote learning thing was not working. So we got the kids back in class. We had some of those COVID rules. I noticed that one of the arguments from the progressives now is they're fishing for a COVID amnesty. So they don't want to be blamed this is being proposed. They want a COVID amnesty so that nobody gets blamed for a bunch of bad decisions during the COVID thing. But we had silly rules come down, and this goes back to decisions in life are not easy. You can't keep everybody happy. We had the Biden administration come down and say, okay, look, if you don't mask up your 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, we're going to remove your Head Start funding. And I listened to that, and I said, look, how much do we get from Head Start from the federal government? Because every federal dollar comes with strings.
Yep.
And they said, I looked at the CFO there, said $104,000 to Perryton, much bigger, obviously, in Amarillo and the other school districts. And I said, we can live without that. We can fund what's going into Head Start and not have to do this because it was just so stupid.
Yeah, it's very harmful.
And it was also interesting in that the Biden administration was willing to cancel Head Start, which is one of the left's favorite programs, impact programs, just because we weren't willing to put a mask on a child that it wasn't going to stay on, and the masks weren't effective anyway. So you have to make choices like that. And so I am coming back to your point here, Dan, is I believe that we had, when I got back on the school board this time, I got thrown off the first time because I got on the wrong side of an AD issue. We're in Texas. Came back on the school board, and we had a failing school in our system. We had a school that was going down, and we are now an A school district. But we had to make some hard choices. We had a community effort that stressed where we were going with that school system, and the staff and the kids jumped in there, put their heads down again, and understood there was a problem. We're an A school district right now. We had to make some hard choices on personnel. We had to, let me back up. I see parental choice, and I mean parental choice, as a way to protect and empower the public school system. This is why this never works on a blurb for a card or a 30-second ad. Right. Because what will happen there, and I think there's a track record across the other states, that we've actually strengthened the public schools when you have more empowered parents and letting them make a choice. I'm not worried about competition. Competition in every aspect of our life tends to strengthen us. That's what I see. I'm watching most of the programs because I wasn't sure about which ones were going to be effective for public schools. I wouldn't put my kids in Houston ISD, and I wouldn't because the state just took over Houston ISD, right? And we were there in Perryton. Okay, so I hear many discussions about accountability and these things. If we're so accountable in what we're doing right now, why is that happening? So parental choice will empower parents. It'll empower children. A lot of my friends that are teachers, I think if they could take a magic wand and just do one thing in the school system, and I'll let them tell me I'm wrong here, but it would be like put that magic wand and just touch a lot of the parents on the head and say, okay, now you're a positive, involved parent that's going to bolster your child's education, because I don't care where you think this choice falls down. It falls down on the individual child and the individual level. I had 3 children graduate from public school in Perryton. 2 of them were valedictorians. One of them's a National Merit Scholar, and that's through the public school in Perryton. I understand. Judy and I, my wife, understand exactly what's possible in the public school system. But the teachers come in. I've got a friend that came in, and she calls me, and she says, Richard, they just came in and dropped 20 IEPs, individual education programs, on me, and I've got to work this along with the rest of the load I've got. We are overloading our teachers with stuff that is irrelevant to classroom teaching. We're worried about funding. If I look at Catholic schools, if I look at private schools, the dollar ratio that goes into the classroom, and that means goes to the teachers and classroom supplies that we can get, that we need, is 80+% in private and Catholic schools. It's, if we measure it right, we can say we're getting 60 to 65% in public schools. If you look at what's built up over the last 20 years in education, we are expanding administration a whole lot faster than we are what's going on in our classroom. So I look at successful programs, which I would call gifted and talented STEM, or the stuff our STEM programs now. We've got some good people, and those kids are, just seeing them learn is just encouraging beyond belief. And we're preparing them for the future. The education's about our kids. It's not about it, and people won't like this, but it's not about my job. And it's not about my job anywhere there, and it's not about teachers' unions or what the education establishment wants. It's about how we prepare those kids. So again, this is a comparison about what Texas is doing right. Washington, D.C. spends $30,000 a year on their kids. That's the ones that graduate, and most of them can't read at level. We don't want to go there. So I think how do we allow choice? How do we allow a parental choice? And again, I'll say this one more time. I see parental choice as a way to protect and empower the public school system, because our system is full of really high quality people. They're not all high quality, because I said earlier, when we had to make some hard choices in Perryton, it was because some people needed to change jobs. But we have to take the chance to look at where we're failing and how to improve. This is a business approach.
Well, what works in Perryton may not work in Amarillo.
That's correct.
So to me, they should give people, I think what you're really saying is you've got to get parents involved in their children's education. You need to incentivize that. How do you do it? With the government controlling the schools, people lose interest.
We've turned our kids' we've just mentally turned our kids' education over to
the state,
to the authority.
Yeah,
that's correct.
So how do we get? I think the main thing is how do we get parents involved in their kids' education, because it's about responsibility of the parent.
Yeah, and most of my teaching friends will tell you that is just that can be insurmountable at times. But we have got to the point, and this is a lot of our lives anymore, we get to the participation trophy, part of our economy and part of our society, and everybody's used to that. And little Johnny or little Susie can't measure up. And I think that's a complete undervaluation of our kids.
But one way to do it is to instill some sort of competition.
Yes.
And you need competition between schools, and you need competitions in the schools.
Well, you have it anyway. I mean, yeah. you have it anyway, whether it's homeschooling or private schools. Sure. But the thing that kind of, because I know what an outhouse is. I grew up pretty poor,
yep, so
and I know running water in the house there for a few years. it bothers me if I look at a bigger city. And again, I lived in Amarillo for a while and was our kids got a good education here too. But the rich always have choices.
So that's why they were valedictorians.
I'll share the glory. I mean, most of the time I give it to my wife. My pastor at my church told me that when my youngest one was awarded that national merit scholar, he said from the pulpit, he said, well, it obviously comes from her mother's side. Yeah. So we need to release the potential, but we need to release the potential for our teachers too. Yep. And you burden them with so many things because we've lost focus of what education is supposed to be. So I know this sounds really cliched, but reading, writing, arithmetic, and STEM, I would say that starts to get us back on the right track. The other thing about privatization, the other thing about parental choice is if I'm making a choice, the CRT thing, the transsexual thing, a lot of things that many of us consider very immoral and downright evil in a few of the cases, those things go away, I think. Yeah. Because then you have to, if you truly believe that stuff, which I don't know many people that do, you have to make a choice to go to a school that allows that.
Well, to me, if they have time to even think of such things, they got too much time.
No, and ever since the federal government stepped in education in the 1960s, I think was the actual day. Maybe it was a gift from Jimmy Carter. I don't remember, but our international standing and our standards have gone down. And you've got staff. I think you've got a group of people in the public schools, the good teachers, the ones when I was on the school board the first time, I said we need to pay this teacher, and this teacher more. Yeah. But not everybody.
That's right.
Because you
can't
create
treat everybody they all have different capacities. So.
Well, another story here. I've got a friend that name's Kathy, and she was teaching school she's a long-term teacher. And these people are in our systems everywhere. And she had got Teacher of the Year, I think 3 out of 10 years. I mean, just a phenomenally good teacher. Small town, but phenomenally good teacher. And I said, Kathy, that is really good. I am really proud of you that you are that exceptional in what you're doing. And she said, thank you, Richard. But the guy across the hall from me, who goes in and lays his head down on the desk and basically ignores the kids for that period, got the same raise I got last year. Yeah. There's something wrong with that. So
that disincentivizes the good teachers.
So you get
demoralizing to the ones that are producers.
Yes, exactly. So some sense of competition, some sense of, and with that should come freedom. So again, you've got a system full of people that just want a green light to do their jobs better. So how do we empower that? How do we empower those teachers in that classroom? That should be the objective. And the funds and everything else should go into the classroom, not in administration, overhead, and a bunch of gobbledygook that we don't need to be paying for.
Yeah, I just think they need to sit down with some good teachers and some good administrators and some good school board people across the state and maybe re-envision how we educate our kids.
Well, our original model we're still on, right, is an industrial model from the 19th century. That's the way we're educating. If you look at let's pick Washington D.C. I don't want to be too controversial here, but if you pick Washington D.C., they've given up on the kids, right? So you take that industrial model. How do we take the really good things from gifted and talented from STEM and get that level of instruction with that level of interest tailored to the kids? How do we give that to all our kids? Because that would be a revolution.
Yeah, I think it could be done. I think it's just a different way of looking at it. You have to kind of scrap the system and put it back together for today's world.
But I said the COVID thing was a stress test on our public education in Texas. We have got school systems, and we are far better than some of the other states, right? Where we still had kids out of school for months.
Well, it just occurs to me, there's some things, though, that you could take from that and probably benefit from. For instance, there's some phenomenal math teachers.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you use technology? And you have 2 or 3 of the best math teachers that can relate to 7th graders, and they have a knack for it.
Yeah.
They could teach geometry or algebra or calculus, whatever math subject that somebody's really good at. Then you could have that as a video course that somebody in the classroom can monitor, right? So not every teacher would have to know everything. And you get the benefit of somebody's expertise. And I think you could scale education up by doing a few simple things like that on every different subject, whether it's history or science or technology or coding or whatever. And but kids need to be around other kids.
Yes.
But the teachers wouldn't necessarily have to be super knowledgeable in every subject.
Yeah, I think that one of the things we did learn, and one of the things that I think we're still learning, is we've got a bunch of really bad things that came out of the COVID stress test. And one of them was the effects on children when, 1, they're masked, and 2, they're not in the classroom talking to other kids. Mm-hmm. That stuff is not good. So, yes, although I'm a little bit leery on remote learning because we had such a bad experience with it.
Well, it wouldn't be remote learning. It would just be remote teaching instead.
Yeah, and I think at the age level, where you're like high school level, Perryton, we don't have we've got a small enough population, a couple thousand kids in the system, and we don't have enough to offer French, for example, at high school level. But the kids at the high school level are going to be in a university next year. They're going to be sitting in a lecture hall with 300 other kids getting taught chemistry or something like that. At that age, I think you adapt to it if you're going to go to the university. One of my other pet peeves about the public education system, it's been a pre-college training ground, and we've got tons of people wandering around with $120,000 worth of debt and a degree they can't get paid for, and that's unfair. But I think we've pushed them that way, and so the career readiness programs, the stuff we used to call VOTEC or training, we're putting programs in place, even some to do with airplanes, mechanics, and that sort of thing in Perryton, trying to give the kids good vocational setups, because working productive citizens with good jobs, and a lot of the trades are exactly that right now. Same thing, me working in the oil and gas industry. Okay, I'm out working on an evil frack job, and we're just doing terrible things out there, necessary things, and that's a different discussion. But at the same time, I'm sitting in a cab. We're pumping, all the pumps are running and everything else. I'm looking at the 6 young people in front of me. I'm out there supervising the job. I've got a couple other people that are supervision because it's a big operation. Six young people in that frack van, supervising that job. 3 of them have got degrees. 3 of them don't have degrees. There is a marginal difference in salaries and stuff, but you got kids out there working weird long hours, but they're able to make $100,000 a year just by doing that kind of work. That's the kind of jobs that fossil fuel drilling, I'll just go right at it, that's the stuff that it brings to Texas. Not Chinese windmills, not German windmills or German solar panels.
And that are all subsidized by the taxpayers.
And they're all subsidized. That's correct.
That means we're paying for them because they don't produce.
Well, they're not economic.
Yeah,
they're not. If you use what I would do, again, I'm an engineer, but most people, even if we go to the grocery store, we use a cost benefit analysis, even if we don't recognize it when we picked up that cucumber.
Yep.
But we do, and so unless we have a fair accounting of cost benefit analysis up and down the structure, I don't care. It doesn't have to be oil and gas. It has to be on ag. It has to be on anything. if you can't do that, and you're trying to tilt your discussion, and that's what goes on in Austin all the time. We've got a bunch of people right now trying to scarf up on federal dollars for putting windmills on the Texas Riviera that is going to make us uglier and stupid and chop up a lot of birds. And it doesn't count anymore because they're killed by good energy as opposed to evil energy. So, we just, again, these things are just common sense things to me.
What kind of energy did they use to make the wind turbines?
Well, that's a really good choice. That's a really good question. And just because I can look at something and not see that kid in the Congo, the little person in the Congo working all day long in a lithium mine, doesn't mean that's not a cost. So when and of course this is even before you get to the disposal issues, right? So
that's before they figure out that they're worth something and can get unionized, and the cost of lithium goes to the moon.
Yeah, so we don't have that technology. Again, I'm an engineer. Things that were wrong 40 years ago in engineering, 35 years ago in engineering, was battery technology. It's still a problem. We still don't have a good solution to the battery technology, but we keep subsidizing windmills and solar that we don't use. I use those. I use solar in my business, but it's where it's applicable.
Yeah, I think in certain applications out in the middle of where you're off the grid and it costs too much to bring power, then you can buy some solar panels and you can run a well.
That's right.
A water well, or it makes sense.
Yes.
But not to power the entire grid or to depend on. You can't depend on it because it's not reliable.
Well,
you can have cloudy days, you can have snow, you can have a lot of things can stop the...
Well, which is what happened during Winter Storm Uri. So I was on as an alternate. I was on when the governor, they appointed the Texas Energy Reliability Council, and that was to make our grid more reliable. And yet we turned around and did not require the wind and solar sources to have what would be dispatchable energy. So the sun doesn't shine, the solar panels don't work, wind stops turning. Not only if they got iced up and destroyed themselves, the wind wasn't generating. So we got in energy shortages. And then I will just tell you, I think they solved a bunch of problems with the TERC group. They did it mainly by going back and looking. I think where the problems actually where we had things shut down during the storm, and we shouldn't have a lot of communication issues, which is generally the truth of life. You get those out of the way first. But Texas is growing, and we've got an energy. We need to meet energy demand. We don't even need to meet energy demand. We need to aim higher so that we have surplus energy. One of the things that I keep saying in my realm as PPRA chairman is this is the first time in history we have ever given up our primary source of energy and given it over to an unreliable source and expected good results. Okay? We can't do that. We have to build for our futures, and so it needs to be reliable and as cheap as we can get at energy, because cheap energy is one of the driving forces of civilization. Oil and gas, my side of the business, that generates Texas jobs. So we get Texas jobs growing, people moving here, economy grows, we get a reliable grid, because one of the things that never went off for me in Perryton was our natural gas supply. And so you got to look at objectives again. What is objectives and what is virtue signaling? And if you're willing to virtual signal and sleep cold in the dark, then you get at the front of the line and you volunteer. But I want reliability in the system.
Right. Yeah, I think for somebody take a personal house or something, if you want, I think it makes sense for somebody to maybe put solar panels up with a battery backup. If you have the money and can afford that, then that gives you
choice
and peace of mind. So if the Xcel energy goes out in a blizzard,
Yeah.
or a fire,
Yeah.
you have a backup energy source.
Well, the
I
Germans.
think that makes sense.
Well, the Germans were cutting trees down this last winter so they could they keep their houses warm. That's just stupid, and short-sighted. And I think Reagan actually told the Germans when they went to the Russian gas they were going to get in this bind. Nobody listened to Trump. President Trump reiterated that, told them, and they all laughed at him. There's a pretty good UN video of them scoffing at him, and yet several years later, here we are again. And so
Germany's
Texas
basically committed suicide.
Yeah, and then somebody helps them along with blowing up the pipeline. Texas doesn't need to do this. We have a good read on what we need to do, and we need to look at what brings prosperity to Texas. And the silly thing about a lot of this stuff, and this goes across the board on education, on all kinds of things, energy. We've got enough bad examples out there in front of us. We don't need to be repeating those. Your learning curve, you need to take on your learning curve, and what works, right, is what we need to be following, not what doesn't work.
So if you get elected as a state rep for District 87, what is your first priority once you get elected?
Well, I think the first priority has got to be the border. I think that is without a doubt so devastating, because basically what we're trying to run right now, we're trying to run an open welfare system with an open border.
So how would you fix it? How would you stop it?
Well, I think
what would you propose?
Well, I think what Governor Abbott did was exactly an excellent idea. I wish it had been earlier, but I'll take any victory we can get right now. The Constitution gives the border control over to the federal government, but the federal government, especially under what this administration, has failed. So we're called to action. We can't just stand there and watch it. And again, they were going to let us absorb all the costs here until Governor DeSantis, Governor Abbott started shipping people to. The funniest one was Martha's Vineyard, because they only had the people across the border there for about I think a day and a half, and they decided all that toleration was no longer required. But I think
they're hypocrites.
Yeah, they're hypocrites, exactly, and that's why. And then I noticed Chicago and New York and the rest of them. They're all using this as an excuse for why they need more federal dollars, which won't solve anything. And
spend your dollars.
Yeah, that's right. So I think for Texas, I think that what the governor's done is exactly right. I think we need to close the border from any more immigration. Immigration has to be controlled, and it needs to be back to Mexico policy. You can't get in the country. So, but basically when Biden got elected, he incentivized half of Central America to head this way. I mean, we've got another caravan, I think, coming up right now, 15,000 people. So,
or we could go to California. They're going to give them free health insurance, health care in California.
Well, you talk about hypocrites. And when they started to show up at California, I think my favorite one was, I think Cher was complaining about, which is, that's how you ought to run your state, complaining that all these people were showing up and nobody take care of them. Well, the good thing is that, probably the Venezuelans don't want any more socialism. They don't want any more communism. But at the same time, I bet you cannot find me an example in all of history that says, let's open your border and just basically run a welfare system and see how far you get.
Well, that's what's happening to Europe. That's why they're in chaos right now.
Yes, and chaos is what we don't want.
We're close.
Yeah, but the thing about Washington and the thing about Austin, quite honestly, in my opinion, is it's easy to make rules when you don't bear the consequences. So Washington talked about how loving and open and tolerant they all are, and then they actually have to deal with it instead of dumping it on Texas and the border states.
Yeah, well, they want you to be tolerant, not them.
That's right. That's a one-way street. So to answer your question, I think we need to discourage. We need to shut the border. Okay. We need to also look at how we structure our. This will probably get me in trouble. How we structure how we're handling long-term immigrants here. And somebody will beat me up with the word amnesty. It's not really intended as amnesty. But I got a call from a young lady from Texas Tech. here probably 2 months ago. And she says, and her question was, how do you determine who you hire for your various jobs in the oil and gas industry? And it was apparently in a few minutes, it was apparent to me that it was a kind of a demographics question. And I said, look, this is a tough job. This is a tough job where you're out there on hard hours, you're roughnecking, you're doing roustabout work. This is a tough job. It ends up we hire mostly Hispanic workers because they're willing to work and they're willing to go out there in the tough situation, and
they're the ones that apply.
And they're the ones that apply. So we've got, if you actually looked at it, and this is what Reagan tried to do in the 80s with the amnesty thing, right? And then the Democrats betrayed him after that. But what we need to do is look at how do we keep the productive members of the society, 20-year people that have raised their kids here. That's pretty stupid to start evicting anybody. That single thing is scaring a lot of people that would be more open to a message of closing the border, slamming it shut, making sure there's no more illegal immigration. There's controlled immigration at our choice, right? Because we've actually shut the immigration off on different years, when it didn't suit America's purpose. And I think that's what you're seeing in Europe right now, is they've so overloaded their systems. And the strength of America is we've always been diverse, because the idea that because we've never been a ethnically unified or even religiously unified society. Where our unification comes from is the Constitution of the United States. We are a unified country based on ideas.
And freedom. Concept of freedom.
That's right. And so that's why everybody loads up and comes here, despite them saying, I get so tired of America the Ugly talks that we get from the left. We're terrible at everything. We're not worth supporting. We won't fight for you, all those sort of things. Yet everybody still lines up and comes. We can't be that bad. And the answer is we are Reagan. I'm getting my favorite president. We are his shining city on the hill. The people is we're standing at the base of the hill with a lot of progressives right now that are throwing stones at everything.
Well, these people hate America and the progressives, and they hate the people, I think, and they want to reduce population, and I just don't understand it. They're like suicidal. There's something wrong with them.
Yeah, I think you've got some pretty good articles that are, again, learn from your bad examples. I think you've got some pretty good articles. What's his name? English guy is pretty good. That has written a book, and it's about the death of Europe. And it's because those examples there are, Europe has instituted things all in the name of incredible tolerance and lovingness and everything else. And they've gone down a road that is unsustainable, and I think he calls it Suicide of the West, I think is what the book was actually called. And the Europeans are dealing with this now. And so if I were to ask a Frenchman, what does it mean to be French? I'm not sure they could answer. But they're starting to, because the one thing that fixes a lot of things in life is consequences.
Yep.
Okay? Same thing goes with what we're doing in Austin. How do we make, because I would pick this set of values that we have up in this district, up in the Texas Panhandle. It would improve Austin immensely. Okay.
Well, what gets me is I think most people across Texas think similarly. They think like the people in Perryton, the people in Taylor, Texas, or Bastrop, or Comal County, or Brazoria County.
Yes.
We're all the same. We all want the same things, and most of the voters are, I think, what I call conservative, which they just want to be left alone.
Normalcy, yeah.
Raise their families, choose their church, build their business, and be left alone by the government.
So what's the young man that sang the song from North Georgia? Richmond north of
Oh yeah,
Richmond north of Richmond or something. That was
Richmond,
the name.
north of Richmond. Or something.
I heard that as a primal scream, and the scream wasn't begging for a lot of things. It was just saying, "Leave me alone. I want to live my life. Okay, I want to be able to prosper my business. I want to jump in and work at things so that what I leave my children is productive. It's a good life. It's an American life. It's the American dream life. But you guys need to get off my back."
Yeah.
And if the point of government is continued growth, which is it likes that, and I want to become a bigger and bigger backpack, what people don't realize is we're complaining about inflation right now, which we should. It was not unnecessary, and they just goofed the whole thing up. But
that's what the government wants.
That's what the government wants. But the
average person doesn't understand what's going on.
Well, if they understood, Dan,
maybe they do.
Well, no, I don't think they do. I don't think they do because the government doesn't help explain anything. They don't take credit for bad decisions, right?
They don't want you because all it is theft. They're stealing from the average person because they have to in order to grow their government.
So if
they're
I were
spending money they don't have, because inflation is simply an increase in the supply of money and credit.
Yes,
you have to have both.
Yes.
They can increase the money supply all they want. It won't be inflationary.
So if I were to ask everyone, including you, what is the number one cost of living increase? What item is the number one cost of increase in your cost of living for the last 40 years? What would the answer be? The answer is the government. Right?
Exactly.
The cost of government has gone through the ceiling. We have piled people on top of people. I think the federal government has 63 programs that are geared for welfare, for just dispersing welfare programs. 63?
Wow.
It's a in Texas too. That's my federal example. We need to make sure government's efficient. Jamie Dimon said, I don't usually quote my bankster buddies, but Jamie Dimon said that we're not getting the government we're paying for. And yet, if you go back and look at your paychecks, the cost of government is the number one thing that has reduced our standard of living. Mm-hmm. Because a dollar that I take in as labor, a dollar I get paid is a choice, right? I can take that dollar bill and do whatever I want with it. I can give it to my kid, I can give it to my school, I can give it to my church. But if you give that control to the government, then you're Bill Clinton. We could give you a tax break, but you wouldn't know what to do with it. Baloney, right? Most people I know can handle their own spending. We don't do it wisely sometimes.
Yeah, but they suffer the consequences, and that's the way it should be.
That's right. The government does no the government is
never
insulated.
Yeah. They don't suffer any consequences.
That's correct.
Like, who's the largest polluter?
Yes.
The government.
Yes, the government. Yeah, that's right.
The U.S. military.
Yes.
By far.
Yes.
Nobody complains a bit.
Yep. That's right.
So government is always the problem. I look at the finance. I was in real estate in Austin in the mid 80s, and I watched the United States Congress wipe out the real estate industry. It was the United States Congress that did it. It's Congress that creates almost every problem. And then they come and create another program to try to fix it.
Yes.
They just need to get out of the way.
Well, and then they get instituted, and they treat them like just sacred cow job programs for federal employees or state employees or however you want to look at it. And America has stopped learning to innovate and to work hard, and we are rewarding things that don't count.
Part of what's happening is there's so much regulations now on business.
Yes.
I mean, so everybody's so busy trying to conform to all the rules and regulations that they can't run their business.
Yeah, I think that was the who ran against Reagan that one time. Can't remember the candidate, but
Bob Dole.
No, it was one of the Democrats, George McGovern. When he actually got out and started working in business, he discovered that regulations were killing it. So we were talking about Texas. Number one thing is the border. Number two thing is probably we need to look at efficiency of the Texas government. I would like to see a hiring freeze on state employees. Okay. Let's make it more efficient. I would also start looking at budgetary cuts and then functional cuts where we actually go in and say, okay, these rules have been in place for 40 years. Are they still applicable to what we're currently doing? We need to get the cost of government down. And if we did, everybody would get a pay raise and we could start growing the thing again. Texas has got the roots to do this. We, more than any other state, have got the roots to do this.
You got to stop it before it gets out of
control. We got to stop it. And so when I said the need right now in the legislature is to stop it, and the fights are for today. They're not for 10 years down the road. We've got to start now because I believe we are at a tipping point. And I hope the tipping point doesn't come from the federal government because we need to resist some of that. And
the federal government really doesn't have much power except what we give them.
Well,
and the way they do it is money. So they give dangle grants and money in front of the states. And once you take the money, then they've got control.
Well, that's why I think that example I gave you on the Biden administration trying to cut the Head Start funds under the threat because we wouldn't mask up little ones. If a government is intentionally willing to do that, why is that, first of all, even in the federal government's control?
I think the problem is most of us grew up, people our age, a little bit different time, when we all believed that the government was there to do the right thing.
Yes, we trusted the government.
We trusted the government.
Yes.
And that's embedded in our psyche. But I'm not so sure that the government is good anymore. And
let me
to
enlighten
get
you.
this through people's heads to where they don't trust, I think it's hard for people to imagine that they can't trust their government. And that's, people just have to wake up.
Boy, there's a bunch of examples out there. I mean, whether you like President Trump or not, which I did. I don't like him. He's kind of an unlikable guy sometimes. However, he did a lot of good things. But they have just this rage going on against the man and his family trying to destroy him is just unbelievable right now. Yeah. And you've got Supreme Court in Colorado. You've got a bunch of loons in Maine that are trying to keep him off the ballot. Where did we ever get the idea that was doable? Because if that's doable...
Well, they did it to Lincoln.
I wasn't aware of that. Oh, well, you mean the southern states, yeah.
No. They kept Lincoln off the ballot in 10 states in 1860.
Oh, okay.
But he won anyway.
Yeah. Well,
it doesn't really make that... But to me, I mean... You got to stand up to these bullies. They're bullies. And they will do anything. They don't care about the law. They don't care about what's right. They just care about what they can get by with. So you stand up to them, and then so I kind of agree with Dan Patrick. We should take Biden off the ballot because he's under impeachment, right?
So I'm down outside the that's right. And so turnabout's fair play. You can't play politics, and this is unfortunate, but you can't play politics if somebody else is playing by a different set of rules.
That's it. I mean,
because you're guaranteed to lose, right?
But when they start, give it back to them times 10. I think you have to do that, and then they'll get the message.
Well, you were talking about the things they don't care about. The progressive left doesn't care about. What they don't care about also, and this is amazing to me, they don't care about talking or discussions any longer.
Because they know that they're wrong.
Yes.
And they know that the American people don't buy into this stuff.
So one of my top two favorite daughters and I were walking into the state capitol, and there's a protest going on outside, and it's a bunch of people with signs, and their signs say a variety of things, but one of the things says flat earthers. You guys are a bunch of flat earthers. My question to her was, how do they expect to influence anybody beyond the people who put the posters together if the first thing I do is call you a name? Mm-hmm. But that's the status. When I grew up in college, we'd sit up to 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and talk all night, talk about politics. My liberal friends would say, yeah, First Amendment, here we go. This is to die for. Mm-hmm. I don't see any of those conversations any longer.
No, they want to get rid of the First Amendment.
Yes, and the Second, and the 10th, and you go down the list. Yeah.
Well, they want to get rid of the Constitution. It's inconvenient for them.
Yes. Well, you can't have the Constitution and that set of ideas that we've always been committed to and run a totalitarian dictatorship. You can't do it. It doesn't fit, right?
Well, which is what most people, not most people, but a lot of people actually want that. They don't want self-rule because they don't want to be responsible. To have a republic takes personal responsibility.
Yes.
And
moral
we've been
people.
Good, hardworking, moral, capable, thinking, God-fearing people. And when you get away from that, then it's easy to take over the nation by nefarious people.
The most encouraging thing, of course, is the last few months we've started to see some of the stuff get shut down. And people, one of the themes I've had since I've been chairman of the board on Panhandle Producers is we need to be talking back. In most of our convention last year, we had a variety of speakers was talk back. Do it civilly if you can, but talk back. Because what we're giving away in our freedoms, we're not paying attention. And we're not talking back. And so now we need to be, if you don't agree with something, I don't care if it's a school board level, I don't care if it's a state level, I don't care if it's a federal level, get involved and start talking back. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I think I can offer the district is I tend to be not shy. And I think we need to have an active voice that's saying, no, wait a minute, that's gone too far. And we need to start serving, which is the public servant side of that. I don't see a lot of servants anywhere anymore. That word has been completely destroyed.
Yeah.
And when you say serve, you mean all the people of the district. But
they're serving themselves, not their constituents.
Well, that's what I see. Honestly, Dan, that's what I see in Austin.
Yep.
I see a lot of people that are, I had one of the consultants down there tell me, well, money makes the world go around. Well, I tend to look at the old Mr. Smith Goes to Washington thing. You got to stand for something,
right? And
you got to know what it is. And if your idea is live free or send me a check, if that's your quote, then we got problems.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people settling for federal dollars with strings and just outright. Let's influence the entire system with dollars.
They've compromised their principles.
That's correct.
They don't have principles, and that's not a good situation. So we need people with principles, is what you're saying, that will stand up and do the right thing, regardless of whether they benefit.
That's correct. And so, and how do you know? You need to have been tested, and you need to be able to understand where you stand on those principles, because leadership is actions. It's not sloganeering. You have to know where you are, and you have to have done it. I mean, I think that's probably what I can offer the district and the people of 87 was, I'm willing to listen to everything, but you got to know where you stand, and you got to know what you're capable of. And I've made a ton of mistakes. I've got a friend that will tell you that Richard's made almost everything. He was talking about the oil and gas industry, but he said Richard's made every mistake in the oil patch once. Right? It's not
No.
that's actually
But
not
you
that
only
bad.
made them once.
I only made them once
That's the
because
key.
you got to learn.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Was there anything else you'd like to tell the voters?
No, I would obviously appreciate the support. We'll have everything up and running here, but look for us out on the website's up.
What's the name of your website?
You're going to give me. We put it up like 2 days ago. So, but look for Richard Beyea, Richard Beyea, and
Be richardba.com.
yeah, Richard Beyea for Texas, I think is what we
Richard
actually
Beyea.
named it. But I ran that race before. So anyway, we're there. Just
You
look
ran
for
in
us.
'88, right?
I ran in '88.
District 88.
District
not
88,
the year.
yes. Yeah, well, yeah, it could be a whole lot of things. But yes, I ran District 88, which
They got redistricted and it changed, and now Perryton's in. 87.
Perryton is with Potter, right? And we're Hansford and Lipscomb and Moore and Hutchinson and Sherman. So we're,
Don't forget Carson.
in Carson. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. And so we've got, we got rural, big chunk of the district's rural. Most of it's Potter County. But
Potter County's what, 50%, maybe 60?
No, I think it's actually, as far as population goes, I think it's more like 70 of the district.
Well, there's 100. You've got roughly 100,000 registered voters in your district, right?
Yes.
Population of roughly 200, probably.
200 plus, yeah.
Yeah. And then what? How many primary voters do you know?
I don't know that exact number. We're obviously.
I think it's around 30.
It's that late.
I think it's around 30,000.
It's that late start, Dan. It's caused me to scramble a little bit here, but I think we've got. I think we can offer the district, because I'm not. This is not a campaign to get reelected. I'm not planning to be there a long time. I don't have that drive to do that for a period of time. I'm not at the age to do that. So I think it's more of right now we fight the fights that are in front of us, and there's a bunch of them that need to be addressed. And I think my experience and my background probably makes me, in my opinion, probably the proven conservative, small government person that needs to be in that job right now.
Very good. Well, we have one of your old signs you handed me back here.
Yeah, I got
What
chewed out
does
for
it
that
say?
one. Yeah, if you're tired of the BS in Austin, vote for BA.
There you
And
go.
I was of course I got chewed out for the little bit of the graphic language there, but I mean I can see anything a lot rougher on that on TV right now.
Well, what they're doing to the citizen is obscene, right?
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah. So which way does that word fall down on? So I've got other signs too that aren't quite as graphic, but I do think the message needs to be that we can do a whole lot better, and we need to act like Texas, and we need to act like we're unified to what Texas means to everybody, and not some kind of West Coast or East Coast model, because we're fighting those battles too. So the media is, with all present exceptions, okay, on this, but the media is East Coast driven. I've talked to
That's the government-controlled media.
yeah,
you're talking
government-controlled media. Thank you. And but I've talked to people that at the Houston Chronicle, Bloomberg on a lot of the energy issues, a couple of school issues. They're all on the East Coast. Even when we're getting newspapers and our local newspapers, you get local state newspapers. A lot of those people are on the East Coast. So what do you think we're being fed?
Yeah, they just want to. They don't care about Texas.
No, they don't care about Texas. They just look at it as another purple state they can turn blue, and we do that. We go there, then we have different choices to make.
Well, it ought to be about Texans, the individuals.
Yes, that's right. And this
about
will be.
people.
I think most people here recognize that, and I do think it's who do you serve? Put the servant back in public servant, and let's see if we can get Texas to its capacity and to its potential. I think that would be the objective.
Well, very good. Well, we sure appreciate you coming by, and I want to commend you for having the courage to stand up and put yourself out there to run for public office. That takes a lot of courage for somebody to do that.
Well, if I got past the first couple phone calls I got and asked me what my IQ was, then I guess I probably agree with you, but I appreciate the comments. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, appreciate it, and good luck out there on the campaign trail.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Dan. Thank you.